Què és la salut mental? Doncs gran pregunta.
Ter saúde mental é ser feliz.
It's something wholesome, general well-being, peace, psychological happiness.
Manter a felicidade mesmo que tenha havido uma falha.
Estar bé amb un mateix i fer allò que pot, que vol, que li agrada, sense fer mal a un mateix ni tindre conseqüències negatives per ningú.
Tot el que provoqui patiment intens no seria salut mental. És veritat que el patiment psicològic existeix, que viure té patiment i té dificultats pròpies del fet de viure.
Sí que és veritat que un en un moment determinat doncs es pot perdre, el que es diu, se li pot anar a la olla, però és que forma part una mica de tot el seu conjunt de la vida, no és algo estrany.
Patir està dintre del que a un ser humà li pot passar.
Nadie que padezca un problema, un trastorno de salud mental está siempre en crisis. Puede tener secuelas de esa crisis, puede tener trastornos originados por esa crisis, pero su crisis empieza, tiene una evolución y acaba.
The degree to which people will be affected by their mental health problem may vary. So some people may have a very short episode and they will recover and go back to their previous lives. Others may have problems on and off over a number of years, and some may have problems for a good number of years.
I tornar a una certa normalitat, a lo que la societat entén com a normal, doncs no sempre és fàcil.
But what we are clear about is that people can recover. It doesn't mean they are necessarily cured, but it means that they can live a full life in spite of any mental health problem that they have.
Se habla de salud mental y se entiende de enfermedad mental. Es como una paradoja, ¿no?
Claro, cuando hablamos de salud mental normalmente nos fijamos en las enfermedades mentales. Nos fijamos en las instituciones, siempre pensamos en psiquiátricos, en centros de salud mental.
As psychiatrists, as doctors, our focus has been on mental illness, and they are strictly defined disorders. And I think we need to appreciate that, but there needs to be more and a move towards mental health.
Claro, si piensas en forma de enfermedad-salud, con un binomio, ¿no? Sí o no, evidentemente, claro, o te sitúas en uno o te sitúas en el otro. Claro, si tú lo entiendes como un proceso, entonces es más fácil pensar, bueno, yo estoy ahora aquí, pero quizá puedo llegar aquí.
Now, mental health is a scale.
You can have, for example, a mental health problem, such as schizophrenia, but you can also have very positive mental health. Or you could have the opposite, you could have no mental health problem as such as diagnosed as a problem, but have quite poor mental health, not feel good, have emotional problems.
1 in 4 people, 25% of the population, will be affected by a mental health problem. That means 3 out of 4 in the population will probably know someone who has a mental health problem, so it does affect everyone.
Salut mental és algo que està en la vida de les persones, jo crec que des de que naixem.
All of us are affected by mental health. Any one of us could become unwell at any point, just like we could become unwell with our physical health.
O doente mental é simplesmente uma pessoa que teve, como outra pessoa qualquer, uma gripe. Uma gripe é uma doença.
I hem d'avançar aquí perquè no es pot dividir, fer aquesta divisió salut física, salut mental, no té massa sentit.
Most people enter services through crisis. When things go badly wrong.
Por los servicios de salud mental, si estuvieran bien enfocados, tendría que pasar todo el mundo porque sería un aprendizaje para que todos disfrutáramos de una mejor vida.
We could reduce the number of people who go in as an emergency admission or through accident and emergency, because people would see the warning signs earlier, and people would take better care earlier.
Ahora, tal como está enfocado, pasan las personas que tienen un trastorno de salud mental y el resultado es que acaban con una peor vida.
La salud mental en verdad nos afecta a todos y todos somos vulnerables de tener un trastorno, de pasar en un momento de nuestra vida por algún momento de crisis.
Es pensa que la salut mental és una cosa d'uns i que la perden i que aleshores fan barbaritats.
Yo creo que precisamente por eso, como crea mucho miedo, la gente lo sitúa fuera como una forma de no, es de ellos, a mí esto no me pasa.
I think people are frightened of difference. I think people are frightened of pain. People are frightened of behaviour that seems a bit odd and a bit bizarre.
This isn't something strange, it's a mental health problem, you know, it's nothing odd about it. And I think just getting rid of that history of seeing it as something to be feared and scared of.
And this has become a whole part of our culture. So even though nearly all of us live in our own homes nowadays, there is still a fear of us. And there is still a lot of prejudice.
Hi ha moltíssimes coses que estan passant i que han passat i que passaran que tenen que veure amb una visió absolutament sesgada, falsa i molt negativa d'aquesta situació humana, que és tenir un problema de salut mental.
And because they're frightened of that, and because they don't understand it, in the past we were locked away out of sight of the community.
Beneficiarii de servicii de sănătate mentală, spunem beneficiari, dar de fapt nu beneficiau de nimic, erau internați într-un spital de psihiatrie și punct.
So they had only their imagination and the stories of the media to work out what we were really like, and they turned us into monsters. And they couldn't understand that we could live a normal life or that we could ever be a normal person or have similar emotions to them.
Very often, if people are seen as different, they're seen as not having the same access to human rights.
És un col·lectiu discriminado.
Però històricament ha estat així. La persona amb un problema de salut mental greu o considerava que no tenia drets perquè la malaltia li colonitzava tot.
So, for example, if you ask a young person how they might view someone with schizophrenia, they have this image, generally with very negative words. It's usually words around fear and unpredictability and violence.
Acham que é bicho, que é monstro, que é incapaz, que é futuro assassino.
There is such a distortion between how a young person views someone with schizophrenia and they're linked to violence and potentially unpredictable behaviour, to the reality of it, which is the complete opposite.
The research shows that they're no more likely to be violent than anyone else, and we're more likely to be the victim of violence.
Porque sea rubio, ojos azules, significa unas cosas determinadas. Porque hayas pasado por un hospital significa otras cosas determinadas. Porque tengas una inclinación sexual significa unas cosas determinadas. Y esto lo marca la sociedad.
Rechaza a un colectivo en concreto, le pone una marca, ¿no? Que el estigma es poner una marca a alguien, ¿no?
People are not just gay, they're people. People are not solely black, they're people. People are not just people with mental illness. They're human beings with so many other parts to them.
There's a lot of stigma attached to mental illness, and I think that it doesn't matter which country you're in the world.
30% of the people who have mental health problems don't want to speak to anybody about it.
They can't tell people.
Amaguen la seva condició d'haver estat amb problemes de salut mental.
Because they're afraid that other people will draw back from them. And often that is correct.
Especially things like employment, when you look at people trying to get jobs.
L'entrevistador, l'empleador, sap que tens un problema de salut mental, o sigui, bueno, no passes la selecció, segur.
So I'd lost my job after 13 years just because I had suffered depression. That stigma.
Nosotros como parte de la sociedad podemos incorporarlo dentro de nosotros y creérnoslo.
And it becomes a vicious circle.
Si yo creo que en un momento determinado pertenezco a este colectivo, entonces es cuando también me autoestigmatizo.
É essencialmente isso, é entender que o estigma não é só de uma pessoa que nunca teve uma doença, mas também dentro das pessoas que tiveram uma doença mental.
La propia persona a la que se pone una marca o se pone unas etiquetas y se queda encerrado en esa definición y no puede salir de ahí. Tiene que ver un poco con el binomio este de enfermo o sano. Si soy enfermo, soy enfermo. Entonces, pues no puedo decidir qué quiero hacer, no puedo tener una vida satisfactoria porque como soy enfermo nunca lo voy a poder conseguir.
Y me pongo un sello que es muy difícil quitar, creo una identidad en base a eso y a partir de entonces todos mis movimientos, todas mis acciones van en base a esa identidad.
Toda una serie de pensamientos negativos que hacen que la persona se encierre en enfermo y ya está, y no en persona. Toda su definición de su ser se centra en la enfermedad.
Imagineu-vos que el tanquen a un lloc, o sense tancar-lo està en el món, en la vida, va parlant i absolutament ningú l'escolta. Aquella persona més sincera, amb més salut, acabaria sense salut.
Un miedo muy grande es a que me digan qué estás diciendo, tú no tienes por qué decir nada de esto.
We want choice. So how can we get our choice if we're not being listened to?
When you can advocate for yourself, when you can speak out about your issues, it gives you strength. And that can help you in your recovery. It's a really strong component of recovery, in fact.
Que és el tema de l'empowerment, que és molt interessant. Amb salut mental és molt interessant i aporta molt valor.
It's about letting people have the opportunity to decide on the agenda of what they think is important when it comes to mental health.
Cada persona tiene unas capacidades, ¿no? Tiene unas capacidades, unas habilidades. Entonces, el trabajo es ayudar a la persona a encontrar esas capacidades o esas habilidades o a reconocerlas y a partir de ahí poder desarrollar algo con ellas.
Estás a dar poder a essa pessoa para ela voltar à vida dela.
Però per manegar la seva pròpia vida, no la dels altres. Això és molt important.
Básicamente es tener las riendas de tu vida, o sea, tener el control, las decisiones sobre tu vida.
It's all about thinking for yourself and not letting other people think for you that are not really experienced enough to think for your best interest.
D'alguna manera la recuperació passa perquè la persona recuperi poder, projecte de vida i no només que no tingui símptomes.
Sobre todo es eso, yo creo que es el sentir el poder que se dice que es, bueno, pues sentir que eres capaz, ¿no? Y lo que más te puede ayudar es que alguien crea en ti.
En un momento determinado, las personas creen que no pueden hacer. Entonces necesita un grupo de gente o alguien, como mínimo, que le anime a que continúe, a que dé un pasito más, a que haga algo.
To, co najbardziej służy zdrowiu, to poczucie, że się jest potrzebnym, zaangażowanym.
Por eso especialmente es muy importante las asociaciones, porque ahí es donde una persona pues, va a encontrar el apoyo de alguien más que está diciendo sí, sí, tú puedes hacer.
Being part of a user association can make a difference. It can make a huge difference to people's lives.
En una asociación de usuarios lo que se hace son procesos de empowerment.
And it's a way of empowering people through a group having a bigger voice than an individual.
Utente que faz parte de uma associação de utentes, criado por utentes, é capaz de ter mais abertura, uma voz mais ativa, uma capacidade maior de entender.
Es que una asociación de usuarios ayuda a la capacitación en sí, como asociación, porque formas parte de un grupo, porque te relacionas con otras personas que han pasado por procesos como tú, por lo tanto puedes compartir, ver que no eres el único.
They feel empowered to speak out, they have increased confidence to speak out.
Being a member of a user group is good for your mental health.
Para que realmente se dé un cambio en la sociedad al respecto, es necesario que existan asociaciones, que se creen asociaciones o grupos que realmente crean que tienen que luchar por tomar las riendas de su vida independientemente y las riendas de la vida social del col·lectiu com a grup.
Perquè si no, com a col·lectiu, com tots col·lectius que pateixen alguna cosa, difícilment es traslladaran el que pensa, el que necessiten i el que volen, tant a qui els atenen com a la societat, individualment.
És agafar moltes idees i moltes vivències de moltes persones, anar-les a buscar activament, recollir-les, posar-les en valor en un document i portar-ho a moure-ho. Això, l'acció individual no ho pot fer de cap manera.
Powstawanie organizacji osób niepełnosprawnych psychicznie, czy osób po kryzysie psychicznym, także dobrze służy profesjonalistom.
And users groups aren't there to attack psychiatrists. They're there to work collaboratively with psychiatrists. And likewise, psychiatrists need to work collaboratively with users groups.
As a professional, you should be proud that the users you work with have found a voice. And by finding a voice, they empower themselves. And by empowering themselves, they put themselves on their road to recovery.
And that doesn't mean to say that you need to agree about everything. It wouldn't be a collaboration if you agreed about everything. But you can discuss everything and take things forward.
Un sistema de salut no pot estar a esquenes de les organitzacions d'afectats, ha d'escoltar-les.
Per què? Doncs de cara a aportar la seva experiència per millorar tot els serveis i els tractaments a les persones amb un problema de salut.
Que algunes coses no es veuen si no és des del punt de vista de l'usuari. És així.
Si los usuarios están ahí, forman parte de eso, se les considera un elemento más a valorar, una opinión más a decidir, evidentemente yo creo que se puede mejorar bastante los servicios.
Powstawanie organizacji osób z niepełnosprawnością psychiczną również pomaga rodzinom.
And it's not just about making things better for someone who uses services, but also for the carer. They have the right to live their life.
I meet families, and sometimes the pain of what they witness us going through is very, very, very hard for them to cope with. And the burden of that means that they can sometimes lose faith in our abilities.
I do take part in an association of carers. Quite often I'm aware that carers feel they know best and that the person needs to be looked after, needs perhaps to be kept at home, needs to be sheltered from their diagnosis and from how other people perceive them.
And I would say I understand that, but I would also say that if we take little risks and make little steps, we can really, really grow.
I think it's very important that we don't smother with care.
From the user's perspective, they need independence. They need to make their own mistakes in order to recover.
I think it's essential that service users and their carers have their own supportive organisations.
Because as a service user, I have a different voice, a separate voice, that gives both of us power. Instead of, if we were together, if we were under one umbrella, and it was both the voice of user and carer together, and it was one advocate speaking on behalf of us, that wouldn't work, because sometimes you're at odds, and someone's going to win. Someone is going to say, no, we can't speak out about that because we have an opposing view. And that's not right. That's not advocacy.
So we need the families to have their voice, we need the users to have their voice, and sometimes we need the families and the users to have a combined voice. And we need us all to take the little risks that allow us to make that voice powerful.
Antes de conhecermos a HUG e principalmente o sucesso das associações de utentes da Escócia, ninguém acreditava que fosse possível.
Va ser revelador veure com moviment d'usuaris i organitzacions d'usuaris a altres llocs havien aconseguit coses molt importants. Parlo d'Escòcia i dels Highlands i de HUG, no?
HUG is a group of people, of 360 people.
We are a network of people who've all experienced some form of mental health problem.
I suppose most of us at one time or another have been in hospital ourselves, and we meet together to change the world, to make it wake up and realise that it needs to change, to shake it and make it realise it needs to change.
And we have two main objectives. One is to improve the services and the treatment that people receive within hospital, but also within community services, and to influence the policy and the strategy with which those services are embedded. And the other side of the work is challenging stigma and increasing public awareness of mental health issues.
And we do that by talking about our lives, the things that are done to us, the treatments we get, the people around us, and we speak out on those issues to make people listen, to hear our voice, to understand, because we're experts by having been through what we've been, in what affects us, what helps us and what doesn't help us.
We don't provide particular support. It's not like that. We are a voice for the people that are our members.
It's very much not speaking for the person, but it's finding a way to support them to speak out for themselves.
That's HUG, allowing me to speak out and be myself, and not to accept injustices. That I am a human being, I do have value as a human being, and I do have a voice.
HUG's reputation speaks for itself in the sense that the messages that they deliver, whether they are verbal messages or written messages, immediately have credibility.
We deliver training, mental health awareness training, to professionals. And that involves psychiatrists, social workers, nurses, as well as people like the police and people within NGOs in the voluntary sector.
We also need to be ever guided by the people who are experiencing these conditions themselves, and their what they like, what they don't like, what they believe in, and take account of all of these factors in how we work with people.
It's very difficult to speak about injustices by staff at user centres.
If I'm brutally honest, initially I was a bit sceptical and possibly a bit threatened by people telling me how I should be working.
We don't just talk to the professionals, we listen to them, and we have discussions and debates, and it's very interactive, it's very dynamic and it's very interactive, and that's the bit that I think people value hugely.
The quality of the work they do to support the people who contribute to our programme is first class.
We also have professionals telling us that it's given them greater confidence to practice.
They have very significantly impacted on the way we practice in Scotland and in Highland. And I think I can honestly say they have very significantly impacted on the way I practice.
And the work that I love and I'm absolutely impassioned about is working with young people.
The anti-stigma work is going around schools talking about mental health and mental illness and what that entails and what it's like to be a young person going through that.
I think it's very important for young people to learn about mental health issues because it's just something that's not spoken about these days.
It really helped me move on as well because you're taking a really negative, horrible experience in your life, but you're getting something from it and you're turning it into almost like a piece of art.
It completely changes their attitude and perspective about what they thought somebody with a mental illness had.
It's just a part of them, and like all of us, we all have, you know, our own problems, and it's not something that determines who they are. It's just something that they have to live with, and I now see that as not half as big a deal as I used to, certainly.
I'm no different from anyone else. Sometimes I feel different, so bad inside that I starve myself. But then people notice I'm getting too thin, and that I'm crying and crying, so they slag me off, act like I don't exist. And that makes me feel worse, because it hurts more when they treat me like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. See me. I'm a person, just like you.
See Me is the national anti-stigma campaign in Scotland, and it came together around about 2001 when 5 organisations decided that we wanted to try and do something about the stigma that is attached to mental ill health in Scotland.
Certainly the Scottish Government invested and have invested and continue to invest a lot of money in this work.
We've spent about £1 million a year for the last 6 years on stigma work within Scotland.
Our long-term ambition is that we will eliminate stigma in relation to mental ill health in Scotland.
Certainly investing in stigma is a good economic investment because we know that if more people with mental health problems enter the workforce, that means that they will earn resources for themselves, they'll pay taxes, they'll probably be more healthy as well and require less treatment, in that we know that work and employment is very much a very healthy thing for many people to do. And so we see the relatively small amounts that stigma campaigns as being very, very worthwhile.
When I first had a mental health problem, I was scared.
You were scared? He calls me up in the middle of the night.
I was making no sense.
I was a bit annoyed.
He was raging.
I go round and something's like wrong.
I'd hidden it so long, I got to the doctors, got help.
You still didn't want folk to know? Didn't want to answer the door?
Only because I knew it was you.
And I just kept going round?
Aye, like a stuck record. Need anything, want to play golf. But I was scared to go out.
You're scared? You'd get beat at golf.
That's what I like about you, Johnny. You didn't change. And I get better.
For people with a mental health problem, what you do makes a difference. Be there, be yourself.
We find the user movement very helpful in Scotland for a number of reasons. They help us in the design and development of policy. They identify what the priorities are for service users and carers. And sometimes those priorities are difficult for us. They're not always easy for us. But it means that we do have to address the real issues and the real lived experience of people.
And it was a slow process. Initially, people found it very difficult to believe that there was any reason we needed a voice. But slowly we gained allies, and we had people in England who were doing the same thing, and a body of literature and evidence that showed there was a moral and ethical and also an evidence-based need for a voice.
And more especially, I think the Scottish Government want to listen to service users now, which, in my opinion, they didn't do before.
Very often we focus and we think about treatment, as though treatment is the only issue. But that wasn't the most important thing that service users told us. They said the most important thing to them was how people treated them, not the treatment that they got. And that's led us to develop something called the Scottish Recovery Indicator, which is a way that we use to assess services, to see the degree to which those services reflect the principles and expectations that service users and we have about how care is delivered. And that we think that's incredibly powerful.
Mental health work in Scotland has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. You can tell by the size of our psychiatric hospitals. They're shrinking. They're becoming, very small in comparison with the big institutions we used to have.
We've seen the closure of the long-stay large hospitals and being replaced with services either in the community or in smaller, more specialist hospitals.
Sometimes my well-being is better when I go and live with a certain person, or in a certain area. So those things are important, and it's about sitting and listening to people rather than just thinking of medication. So one of the big developments is in choice, and another massive development is in the shift to people living and working and breathing in their own communities.
HUG started about 12 years ago and is now a very developed group, but there are also other groups across Scotland. We have Acumen, we have Augment, we have Plus, we have Vox, our national voice, we have Lanarkshire Links, we have Edinburgh Users Forum, East Lothian Involvement Group. These groups are all over the country, and they're slowly beginning to grow, and there's a stronger and stronger need for these groups to exist in every region, so that between them they can work locally and feed in nationally and hopefully feed in internationally to make a change that occurs across the world, because the things that we experience in Scotland also happen in other countries, and we need to join with users in every part of the world to say that some of the injustices we go through, we can, by gaining strength together, change through having a united voice.
Because quite often the problem is people don't know it's possible. It's an education issue. And now we've educated, it's now the hard work time. Now people have to go and do that in their own back gardens, in their own countries.
Clar, veient com estava desenvolupat allí, és quelcom que teníem una mica en la ment, però com una mica difús, no? Si era possible, si era dient. I allò ens va donar una mica la mida que allò era possible i que allò tenia que anar cap allí.
Pero yo creo que lo más importante fue el decir, ostras, se puede hacer.
El camí que aquí sembla una utopia, una cosa molt complicada i molt difícil a altres llocs, havien aconseguit grans coses.
And this is how it happens. The word spreads, you're known with small, tiny steps to make small changes. You know that a small group of people can go and meet a small other group of people and change their minds forever. And by doing this, by meeting together, by encouraging each other, by supporting each other, by acting as a catalyst to the huge talents our members have, we give something that people want to be a part of. Not everyone wants to change the world, but some people do. And when they meet each other and they support each other, then they can help that change happen.
So if I can speak out and challenge the system, challenge attitudes, challenge professional practices, so that nobody goes through what I went through, then I will have done something great.
How do you see a person with mental health problems? What do you see there?
Faries el mateix si fos un amic teu?
How would it feel if your voice and your experience weren't respected?
Why would you not speak out if you think that the way you live your life is unfair and unjust?
How can we understand what the impact of what we're going to do will be if we don't engage and discuss and consult with the people who are going to be receiving a service?
Creus que el que fas ajuda a la persona a tenir, a recuperar un projecte de vida? O no?